My dear friends, it is with a certain tremor in my heart that I find myself once more recounting the exploits of my extraordinary friend, Hercule Poirot. One might think, after all these years, that I would grow accustomed to the unsettling chill of a murder investigation, the labyrinthine paths of human deception. Yet each new case, like the one I'm about to relate, brings with it a fresh wave of apprehension, a renewed sense of the darkness that can lurk beneath the most respectable facades. I recall this particular instance vividly, the crisp autumn air, the scent of damp earth, and the sudden, chilling news that shattered the tranquility of a quiet London lane. It was a feeling of unease that settled deep in my bones, a premonition, perhaps, of the intricate web of lies Poirot would soon untangle. Do subscribe to the channel for more of our thrilling adventures. Now, let us begin with the first chapter of The Murder on Ashford Lane. Chapter 1. A Morning Call to Mayhem. The insistent ringing of the telephone shattered the tranquil hum of our breakfast room, a rude awakening that sent a jolt through the quiet morning. I glanced at Poirot, who was meticulously arranging a piece of toast on his plate, his expression one of mild annoyance at the interruption. He detested any deviation from his morning ritual, which included, in precise order, his coffee, a soft-boiled egg, and his toast cut into exact squares. The telephone, however, was rarely a harbinger of trivialities when it called us. I picked up the receiver. "Hastings here," I announced, my voice still a little gruff with sleep. "Captain Hastings, it's Inspector Japp. Terribly sorry to disturb you so early, but I've got a real puzzler on my hands, and I dare say your little grey cells might be needed, Poirot." Japp's voice, usually jovial, held an unusual edge of grimness. I relayed the gist to Poirot, who merely raised an eyebrow, a clear signal that he was listening intently, despite his feigned disinterest. "What is the nature of this puzzler, Japp?" "Japp?" I asked, holding the receiver slightly away so Poirot could hear. "Murder, Captain. A nasty business on Ashford Lane. Sir Alistair Finch. Found him this morning by his housekeeper, right in his study. Looks like a robbery gone wrong, but something feels off. Very off." Poirot, now abandoning his toast, nodded slowly. "Sir Alistair Finch, you say? A prominent gentleman, no?" "Indeed, Poirot. Philanthropist, industrialist, a man with his fingers in many pies, and now quite dead. Shot, from the looks of it. At his residence, number 14 Ashford Lane. Can you and Captain Hastings make it over? The scene's secured, but time is of the essence." "We shall be there, Japp, with alacrity," Poirot declared, taking the phone from me with a surprisingly swift movement. He spoke a few more words with Japp, his tone already shifting into his professional, precise manner, then hung up. "Ashford Lane," he mused, tapping a finger on his chin. "A most respectable address. One does not expect such unpleasantness there." He turned to me, his green eyes sparkling with a familiar intensity. "Hastings, mon ami, it appears our peaceful morning has been irrevocably interrupted. Kindly fetch your coat. We have a murder to investigate." Within 20 minutes we were in a taxi, navigating the bustling London streets towards the quieter, tree-lined avenues of Ashford Lane. The morning mist still clung to the hedges, lending an ethereal, almost secretive atmosphere to the affluent neighborhood. As we approached number 14, I saw the familiar flashing blue lights of police cars and the uniformed constables securing the perimeter. A small knot of curious neighbors had already gathered, their faces a mixture of shock and morbid fascination. Japp met us at the garden gate, his usually cheerful face etched with weariness. "Poirot, Captain. Glad you could make it. Come this way. It's not a pretty sight, I warn you." We followed him up the gravel path to a large, imposing Victorian house. The front door stood ajar, revealing a glimpse of a grand hallway. Inside, the air was heavy with the sterile scent of antiseptic and something else. Something metallic and distinctly unpleasant. a grim reminder of the violence that had transpired. The victim, Sir Alistair Finch, was found in his study, just off the main hall, Japp explained, lowering his voice as we stepped into the house. Housekeeper, Mrs. Beatrice Adebayo, discovered him around 7 this morning. She was making her rounds, bringing him his morning tea. As we entered the study, a wave of cold dread washed over me. The room was large and opulent, filled with dark mahogany furniture, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, and framed certificates and photographs. But the focus was undeniably on the figure slumped over a large antique desk amidst a scattering of papers. Sir Alistair Finch, a man of formidable reputation, now reduced to a tragic, silent tableau. His face was pale and lifeless, eyes staring blankly at the ceiling. A dark stain bloomed on his immaculate tweed jacket just over his heart. The desk drawers were pulled open, contents spilled onto the rich Persian rug, suggesting a frantic search. As you can see, Japp gestured around the room, it looks like a robbery. The safe in the wall behind his desk is open, and judging by the papers strewn about, they took their time rummaging. But there's something that bothers me, Poirot. Something about the way everything is arranged. Poirot, however, said nothing. He had already begun his meticulous survey of the room, his eyes darting from one detail to another, missing nothing. He moved with a characteristic, almost tiptoeing grace, his head cocked slightly to one side, like a curious bird. He examined the spilled papers, the open safe, the position of Sir Alistair's body, but his gaze lingered on something else entirely, something I couldn't quite discern, something utterly insignificant to my untrained eye. He bent down, picked up a small object from beneath the desk, and held it delicately between his thumb and forefinger. It was a single, iridescent button, no larger than my thumbnail, shimmering with a subtle, mother-of-pearl sheen. "Interesting, n'est-ce pas, Japp?" Poirot murmured, his voice barely above a whisper, his eyes glinting with a sudden, unnerving understanding. "This, I think, is where our investigation truly begins. For this little button, mon ami, tells us a story that the messy room tries so desperately to conceal. A story that suggests this was no mere robbery, but something far more personal." He held it up, catching the light, and a shiver ran down my spine. What could a simple button possibly reveal that would contradict such an obvious scene? I felt a familiar frustration at my own lack of perception, knowing Poirot had already spotted some crucial detail I was completely blind to. His silence, at this moment, was more unnerving than any pronouncement. What unspoken truth was already forming in his brilliant mind? Chapter 2. The Housekeeper's Account. Poirot turned the small iridescent button over in his palm, his gaze fixed upon it as if it held the secrets of the universe. Japp, baffled, could only scratch his head. "A button, Poirot? What's so special about a button? It could have been there for ages, fallen off anything." "Ah, but the context, Japp, the context," Poirot said, his eyes still sparkling with that unnerving intensity. "It was found beneath the desk, a place not easily disturbed. And its sheen, it is of a peculiar quality, not an ordinary button by any means, but we shall return to this. First, we must hear from the person who discovered the poor Sir Alistair. The housekeeper, Madame Adebayo, you said." Japp led us to the kitchen, a brightly lit room that seemed strangely out of place after the morbid scene in the study. Mrs. Beatrice Adebayo, an elegant woman of African-Caribbean descent, with kind but weary eyes, sat at a large table, a mug of tea cradled in her hands. A young policewoman was taking her statement, but upon seeing Japp, she immediately stood, her posture erect despite her obvious distress. "This is Mr. Poirot, Mrs. Adebayo, and Captain Hastings," Japp introduced. "They are here to help us understand what happened." Mrs. Adebayo nodded politely, her voice soft but clear. It's still so shocking. Sir Alistair, he was always so particular. Poirot offered her a reassuring smile. Madame Adebayo, we understand this is difficult. Please take your time. You say you found Sir Alistair this morning? Yes, sir. As I do every morning. I've worked for Sir Alistair for 10 years now. He liked his tea promptly at 7. I knocked on his study door as usual, but there was no answer. It was unlike him to be out of the study at that hour, or not to respond. He was a man of routine, you see. And then, Poirot prompted gently, I tried the door and it was unlocked. I just pushed it open a little, thinking perhaps he'd fallen asleep, and then I saw him, slumped over his desk. I knew instantly something was terribly wrong. I didn't go in fully, I saw the blood and the mess, and I knew. I screamed, I think. And then I ran to call the police. Her voice faltered, and she took a shaky breath. Did you touch anything, Mrs. Adebayo? Japp asked. No, sir, not a thing. I just stood there, horrified, then ran to the telephone in the hall. My hands were shaking so much I could barely dial. Did you see or hear anything unusual last night or early this morning? Poirot inquired. Any strange noises? Footsteps? Voices? She thought for a moment, her brow furrowed. Nothing, sir. Not a sound. I live in the staff quarters at the back of the house, above the kitchen. My bedroom faces the garden. I'm a light sleeper, too. But the night was completely silent. Until I found Sir Alistair, that is. And the front door? Was it locked when you came down this morning? Yes, sir, as far as I could tell. I always check it last thing at night, and this morning when I ran out to the phone, it was closed. I didn't try to open it myself, but it looked secured. The study door, Poirot continued. You said it was unlocked. Was that usual? No, not at all, sir. Sir Alistair always locked his study door at night. He had many valuable papers, and sometimes he'd be working late. He was very particular about security, especially after a small incident a few years ago with some disgruntled former employee trying to get into his files. This caught Poirot's attention. An unlocked study door, yet a meticulous man of routine who values security. Intriguing. Did Sir Alistair have any visitors last night? Not that I'm aware of, sir. He usually informs me if he's expecting anyone late. His daughter, Miss Anya Petrova, she sometimes calls by unexpectedly, but I haven't seen her for a few days. And Mr. Sharma, his business partner, he was here yesterday afternoon, but he left around 6 o'clock. Nobody else. Miss Petrova? I interjected. Petrova, is she related to Sir Alistair Finch? Ah, yes, Captain, Mrs. Adebayo explained with a slight sigh. She's his daughter from his first marriage. Her mother was Russian. Lady Finch, Sir Alistair's late wife, was her stepmother. Miss Anya doesn't use the Finch name. She's an artist, very independent. Poirot listened, his gaze fixed on Mrs. Adebayo, absorbing every nuance of her expression. Thank you, Madame Adebayo. You have been most helpful. One more question. Sir Alistair's attire. Was he dressed in what he normally wore to work from home, or something different? That tweed jacket and trousers? Oh no, sir. That was his going-out attire. He was very particular about his clothes. If he was just working in his study, he would wear a dressing gown, or at most, a casual blazer. He always changed into formal wear only when expecting guests or going out. To find him in that, it's just not right. A faint smile touched Poirot's lips. Just so. Not right at all. Thank you again, Madame Adebayo. We may have more questions for you later. As we left the kitchen, Poirot's eyes were gleaming. You see, Hastings, 2 inconsistencies already. A locked study door that was found unlocked, and a man dressed for an outing, yet found dead at his desk in the middle of the night. This is not the scene of a simple robbery. This, mon ami, is something far more cunning. And the button. I feel it holds a key to unraveling a truth that someone is desperate to keep hidden. What if the murderer isn't who we expect, but someone who knew Sir Alistair well enough to stage such a scene? The thought sent a chill down my spine. Chapter 3. The Estranged Daughter and a Missing Item. The revelation about Sir Alistair's attire and the unlocked study door had significantly altered my perception of the crime. What had initially seemed a brutal, albeit straightforward, robbery was now clearly much more complex. Poirot, of course, had seen this from the outset. "The button, Poirot," I ventured as we walked back toward the study. "You said it tells a story. What sort of story?" Poirot paused, adjusting his tie. "It is not merely a button, Hastings. It is a button of mother-of-pearl, yes, but of a very specific, almost antique design. Such buttons are not commonly found on modern garments. It suggests a certain provenance, and its placement beneath the desk indicates it likely fell during a struggle, or perhaps a very close encounter." Jap, who had been listening intently, interjected. "So you think the killer wasn't just some common burglar, but someone with a connection to an older, perhaps bespoke, item of clothing?" "Precisely, Jap, or perhaps something else entirely. We must keep our minds open, like a fresh canvas." We re-entered the study. The forensic team was meticulously dusting for prints and cataloguing items. Jap pointed to the open safe. "We've had a preliminary look. It appears some bearer bonds and a substantial amount of cash are missing. Also, a very valuable antique pocket watch that Sir Alistair was known to possess. A family heirloom, apparently." "The pocket watch," Poirot mused. "That is an interesting detail. A valuable, portable item. A perfect target for a thief." He then gestured towards the desk. "And these papers, scattered so artistically, were they merely tossed or arranged to convey a certain impression?" A young forensic officer, Mr. Davies, spoke up. "We've tried to log them, Mr. Poirot. Mostly business documents, financial statements, and a few personal letters. Nothing immediately obvious seems missing, apart from what was in the safe. Everything appears to have been thoroughly rummaged through, but not necessarily organized or specifically targeted, if that makes sense." "It makes a great deal of sense, Monsieur Davies," Poirot replied with a faint smile. "It suggests a hasty, perhaps even staged, ransacking. One designed to look like a desperate search rather than a precise theft." He then turned his attention to the photographs on the desk. One particularly stood out, a younger Sir Alistair, beaming with a striking woman who bore a strong resemblance to Mrs. Adebayo's description of Anya Petrova. "His daughter, I presume?" Poirot asked, picking up the photograph carefully. "Yes, Miss Anya Petrova," Jap confirmed. "We've sent a patrol car to her flat to bring her in for questioning. She lives in a rather bohemian part of Notting Hill, I hear. An artist, as Mrs. Adebayo mentioned. Haven't seen her around here much in recent years. Bit of a strained relationship, apparently." "Ah, the estranged child." Poirot nodded, his gaze distant. "A classic motif, and often a tangled thread in the tapestry of a murder. The will, one presumes, would be of interest to her." "We'll be looking into that, of course," Jap assured him. "Also, the murder weapon hasn't been found yet. A small-caliber pistol by the looks of the wound. No spent casings in the room, so it was either a revolver or the killer took the casings with them. Not very professional for a smash-and-grab kind of burglar." "Indeed not," Poirot agreed. "A detail that speaks volumes, n'est-ce pas? A killer who thinks to remove evidence suggests a mind that plans, rather than merely reacts. And the locked door to the study, unlocked by the murderer, yet closed again after they left, and the victim dressed for an outing. There is a story here, Jap, of layers and deception, a narrative crafted with intent." He paused, his eyes narrowing. "Hastings, tell me, what is the most intriguing piece of evidence to you so far?" I pondered for a moment. "Well, the button is certainly curious, Poirot, and Mrs. Adebayo's observation about Sir Alistair's unusual attire. But the idea that the murder weapon wasn't left behind, that it was taken, that implies a colder, more calculating killer than a common thief." "Excellent, mon ami," Poirot said, patting my arm. "You begin to see the pattern. But there is yet another detail, Hastings, one that has been staring at us from the moment we entered this room, yet remains unremarked upon. He gestured vaguely towards the desk, his eyes alight with a mischievous glint. It is something missing, yet its absence is as loud as its presence would be. Something that tells us not only about the killer, but about Sir Alistair himself. What could it be, Hastings, that would make a man of means and meticulous habits feel so utterly exposed, so terribly vulnerable in his own home, and who would know enough about him to capitalize on such an absence? I racked my brain, scanning the opulent room again, trying to grasp the invisible thread that Poirot had so effortlessly perceived. What could possibly be missing that was so significant, yet so subtle, that it escaped all our notice? The thought gnawed at me. Chapter 4. A dinner appointment and a curious lack. Poirot's cryptic remark about something significant being missing from the study left me utterly bewildered. I scanned the room again, looking at every book, every ornament, every piece of paper. Jap and the forensic team were also visibly puzzled, exchanging glances as Poirot merely smiled faintly, clearly enjoying our collective befuddlement. "Come, Hastings," Poirot finally said. "Leave the little grey cells to process for a moment. They require a certain quiet incubation. We have a young lady to interview, a Miss Anya Petrova, who may shed some light on Sir Alistair's recent affairs, particularly those of the familial variety." Soon after, Miss Anya Petrova arrived at Ashford Lane, escorted by a plainclothes detective. She was, as Mrs. Adebayo had described, a striking woman, perhaps in her late 20s, with fiery red hair and piercing blue eyes that held a raw, artistic intensity. She wore a paint-splattered denim jacket over a simple black dress, and despite the grim circumstances, carried herself with an air of defiant independence. Her initial reaction upon seeing the house was a mixture of grief and a sort of weary resignation. "Thank you for coming, Miss Petrova," Jap began, leading her into the drawing room, a less morbid setting than the study. "We understand this is a difficult time." "Difficult is an understatement, Inspector," Anya said, her voice husky with emotion. "My father, despite our differences, he was still my father. What happened?" Jap gave her a brief overview of the apparent robbery. Anya listened, her face hardening slightly. "A robbery? That seems crude. My father made enemies, but usually of the more sophisticated variety." Poirot, who had been observing her intently, now spoke. "Miss Petrova, Madame Adebayo mentioned a certain estrangement between you and Sir Alistair. Is that correct?" Anya's gaze sharpened, meeting Poirot's unflinchingly. "We had our disagreements, Mr. Poirot. My father was a man of industry, of business. I'm an artist. Our worlds rarely converged. He wanted me to follow in his footsteps, join the family empire. I refused. He saw my art as a frivolous pursuit. It caused friction." "When was the last time you saw your father, Miss Petrova?" "About 2 weeks ago. He'd invited me for dinner. A rare attempt at reconciliation, I suppose. It didn't go well. We argued about my exhibition, about his latest business venture, the usual. I left rather abruptly." "Did you come to the house last night by any chance?" Jap asked. "No, absolutely not. I was at my studio in Notting Hill working late on a new sculpture. My landlord, Mr. Chen, can verify that. He usually pops by to check if I need anything." "And your relationship with your stepmother, Lady Finch, before her passing?" Poirot continued, subtly shifting the focus. "Lady Finch was a kind woman," Anya replied, a touch of genuine sadness entering her voice. "She understood me better than my father ever did. She even bought one of my early paintings, but she passed away a few years ago. Cancer." "Did your father have any particular concerns recently, Miss Petrova? Any threats? Business rivals who might wish him ill?" Anya hesitated. "My father was a complex man. He always had a dozen projects on the go. There was talk of a new development project, something controversial involving a large piece of land. and his business partner, Rohan Sharma. They were sometimes at odds, but actual threats. Not that I know of. He was far too proud to admit to such vulnerabilities. Poirot nodded, then, to my surprise, brought up the earlier observation. Madame Adebayo mentioned that Sir Alistair was wearing what she called his going-out attire, yet he was found in his study. Does that strike you as unusual? Anya frowned. Yes, very. My father was a stickler for comfort when working at home. He'd wear a silk dressing gown or an old blazer. He certainly wouldn't be in a tweed suit unless he was expecting a very important visitor or preparing to go out. Did he have any such engagements planned for last night, to your knowledge? Not that I know of. If he was dining out, he'd usually tell Mrs. Adebayo, and he never ate alone in the study when dressed like that. He preferred the dining room. It's truly baffling. She paused, then added, It makes no sense. Unless he was going out and someone caught him before he left. Or he was meeting someone in the study who he wanted to impress. Poirot smiled, a glimmer of satisfaction in his eyes. Precisely, mademoiselle. It is what makes no sense that often points to the truth. Thank you, Miss Petrova. We will, no doubt, have more questions. As Anya was led away, Japp turned to Poirot. Well, that was informative. Confirms a strained relationship, a potential motive with the will, and an alibi to check. But what was that bit about something missing? What are you talking about, Poirot? Poirot looked at Japp, then at me, a playful twinkle in his eye. Ah, Japp, Hastings. Think. A man of Sir Alistair's standing, found in his study, dressed to impress, perhaps for a dinner appointment, yet his desk is ransacked. What would such a man always have on his desk if he were meeting someone of importance, or even just working, especially if he was a man of precision and punctuality? A man like him would need it to coordinate such engagements to ensure all was in order. He then added with a flourish, It is the absence of this item that screams volumes, for it is something quite ordinary, yet absolutely vital to the meticulous man we have heard described. Its removal suggests not merely a robbery, but a deliberate attempt to erase a specific trace of his final hours. What could it be that is so universally present, yet utterly gone, from the life of a man consumed by schedules and appointments? The question hung in the air, mocking my inability to see the obvious. What commonplace, yet crucial item had vanished, and why? Chapter 5. The Absent Journal and a Secret Rendezvous. Poirot's incessant riddles, though frustrating, always served their purpose of sharpening the mind. I racked my brain, trying to decipher what ordinary yet vital item a meticulous businessman like Sir Alistair would always have on his desk. A pen? No, there were several. A blotter? Present? A calendar? Most likely. Then it hit me. His diary, Poirot, I exclaimed, a burst of satisfaction. A man of Sir Alistair's habits would surely keep a detailed personal or business diary, a ledger of his engagements, appointments, and perhaps even his thoughts. Poirot beamed. Mon ami, your little grey cells are beginning to awaken. Precisely. We have heard that Sir Alistair was a man of precise routine, who would dress for a dinner appointment. Such a man would have a diary, a journal, to keep track of his intricate schedule. Yet it is nowhere to be found among the scattered papers, nor in any of the desk drawers. Its absence, Hastings, is a deliberate omission. Japp, his eyes widening, nodded slowly. A diary? You're right, Poirot. That's a crucial piece of evidence that could tell us who he was meeting, or what he was planning. If it's truly gone, then the killer must have taken it. They didn't just want money. They wanted to erase a schedule. Indeed, Poirot agreed. This points away from a random burglar and squarely towards someone who knew Sir Alistair intimately enough to know he kept such a record, and crucially, what secrets it might contain. While the police began a more thorough search specifically for a diary, Poirot insisted we interview Mr. Rohan Sharma, Sir Alister's business partner. Mr. Sharma, a man of Indian origin with a sharp business acumen, arrived shortly after, looking grave but composed. He was impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, his dark hair slicked back. "This is a terrible tragedy," Mr. Sharma stated, his voice calm yet with an undercurrent of genuine sorrow. "Alistair and I built our empire together over 2 decades. He was like a brother to me." "Mr. Sharma," Poirot began, "Mrs. Adebayo mentioned you were here yesterday afternoon. What was the purpose of your visit?" "Yes, that's correct. We had our usual weekly strategy meeting. Discussed the new land development project in Sussex. Alistair was particularly keen on it, despite some local opposition. We finished around 6. I left him here, in his study, perfectly well." "Did you notice anything unusual during your visit, Mr. Sharma?" Japp asked. "Anyone else expected?" "No, nothing. The house was quiet. Alistair was in good spirits, if a little preoccupied with the project. No one else was expected, as far as I knew. He often worked late, so it wasn't unusual for me to be the last one to leave." "You mentioned local opposition to the land development project," Poirot said. "Was this opposition particularly fierce? Any threats made?" "There have been protests, yes," Mr. Sharma admitted, a slight frown creasing his brow. "Environmental groups, local residents, the usual, some rather aggressive leaflets, even a few anonymous letters to Alistair, but nothing that seemed genuinely life-threatening. Alistair was a man who thrived on a good fight, professionally speaking." "Did you and Sir Alistair have any disagreements recently, Mr. Sharma, business or otherwise?" Poirot's question was direct, his gaze unwavering. Mr. Sharma hesitated for a fraction of a second, just enough for Poirot to register it. "Like any partnership, we had our differences, Mr. Poirot. Alistair could be stubborn, and I, perhaps, overly cautious. But we always found common ground. Our business relationship was strong, symbiotic, and, personally, he was a dear friend." "You were aware Sir Alistair kept a personal diary or journal of his engagements?" Poirot pressed. "Of course. He was meticulous about his schedule. I often had to consult it for upcoming meetings or trips. It was a small leather-bound book, usually kept on his desk, or locked in his desk drawer if he was stepping out for a longer period." "And did you see it yesterday, Mr. Sharma?" "I believe so. Yes, it was on his desk, open to that day's page as he was making notes for our next meeting." "And the antique pocket watch, the family heirloom. Did you see that as well?" Japp asked, referring to the item reported missing from the safe. Mr. Sharma's face darkened further. "The watch? Good heavens, is that missing too?" "That was his grandfather's. He cherished it. No, I didn't see it yesterday. He kept it in his personal safe, of course. He rarely took it out except for special occasions." Poirot continued. "Sir Alistair was found dressed in his going-out attire. Do you know if he had a dinner engagement last night, Mr. Sharma, after your meeting?" Mr. Sharma thought hard. "He didn't mention one to me, but it's possible. He had a wide circle of acquaintances. Perhaps a business dinner that was arranged at short notice, or a private rendezvous that he wouldn't typically mention." The last phrase was delivered with a subtle raising of an eyebrow, suggesting a hint of personal knowledge. "A private rendezvous?" Poirot echoed, his eyes narrowing. "Do you have any reason to believe Sir Alistair was involved in something clandestine, Mr. Sharma?" Mr. Sharma shrugged, a fleeting, almost imperceptible gesture. "Alistair was a powerful man, Mr. Poirot. He had his secrets, as all men do, but I wouldn't presume to speculate on their nature. He was always discreet." Poirot thanked Mr. Sharma, observing him closely as he left. "Discreet indeed. But sometimes discretion breeds suspicion, Hastings. Mr. Sharma's reluctance to elaborate on Sir Alistair's secrets is notable, and the missing diary, confirmed by both Mrs. Adebayo and Mr. Sharma, now becomes our most urgent lead. Someone wanted to erase Sir Alistair's final appointments, or perhaps a very specific meeting Who would know what was in that diary, and who would gain from its disappearance? Could it be that Sir Alister was not simply meeting someone for dinner, but for something far more illicit, something that led directly to his demise? And perhaps this secret rendezvous explains not only the missing diary, but the peculiar choice of attire. The plot, Hastings, thickens with every new revelation, and I suspect that button, which still whispers its secrets, might link to something more than just an old coat. Perhaps to a specific clandestine encounter that occurred at the very time of the murder. The idea of a secret tryst leading to murder was a far more intriguing and dangerous prospect than any mere robbery. Chapter 6. The Gardener's Tale and a Secret Letter. The notion of a clandestine rendezvous had opened a whole new avenue for Poirot's investigations. The missing diary was no longer just a missing item. It was a testament to a secret life, deliberately erased. Our next interview with the groundskeeper, Tommy Smith, provided an unexpected twist. Tommy was a burly man in his late 50s with rough hands and a perpetually scowling face, clearly uncomfortable under police scrutiny. Tommy Smith, for 20 years, I've looked after Sir Alister's gardens, he grumbled, wiping his hands on his trousers. Never seen such a thing. Terrible. Mr. Smith, Japp began, did you notice anything unusual last night or this morning? Any strange vehicles or people on the lane? Nah, not a thing. I live in a small cottage on the estate at the very back near the greenhouses. My window faces the back hedge. I wouldn't hear much from the front of the house, and I'm a heavy sleeper, I am. All that fresh air and digging makes you sleep like a log. Did you have any interactions with Sir Alister yesterday? Poirot asked, his gaze fixed on the man's calloused hands. Only saw him briefly in the morning inspecting the new rose beds. He was in a fine mood for him. Always had an opinion, Sir Alister. Always particular about his roses. Said he was having an important meeting later and the gardens needed to be impeccable. He was always keen on appearances, that one. An important meeting, you say? Poirot prompted. Did he elaborate on the nature of this meeting, or with whom? Nah, he never did with me. Just said important. But I did see him again later, just after Mr. Sharma left around 6. Oh, I was finishing up near the study window, pruning the ivy. He was on the phone, looking agitated. Very agitated. Pacing back and forth. What did you hear, Mr. Smith? Japp leaned forward. Not much, sir. Just snippets. Unacceptable, he kept saying. You can't do this. Sounded like he was arguing with someone. Then he slammed the phone down. Looked pretty furious, he did. This was new information. Sir Alister had been agitated just hours before his death. Did you see anyone else arrive at the house after Mr. Sharma left? No, sir, not a soul. I worked till about 7, then went back to my cottage. Didn't see any cars come up the drive either. And the gate, Mr. Smith? The main garden gate. Is it usually locked at night? Always. It's electronic with a code. Sir Alister was paranoid about security. Mrs. Adebayo and I were the only ones with the code apart from him, and he usually locked it remotely from his study. Very particular about that, he was. Poirot's eyes twinkled. Paranoid about security, yet the study door was found unlocked. Intriguing. And the button, Mr. Smith, have you ever seen a button like this? Poirot produced the iridescent button, showing it to the gardener. Tommy squinted at it. Can't say I have. Looks fancy, though. Not something you'd find on my work clothes, that's for sure. He gave a short, humorless laugh. Just as we were finishing with Tommy, Japp received a call from the forensic team. Poirot, Captain, we've found something in the study, tucked away behind a loose panel in one of the bookshelves. Looks like a hidden compartment. We hurried back to the study. The forensic officer, Mr. Davies, was carefully extracting a single, folded letter from a small concealed niche behind a row of particularly dusty Shakespeare editions. The letter was old, the paper yellowed, and the ink faded. It seems to be a very old letter, Mr. Poirot," Davies said, handling it with gloved hands. "Undated, but the paper suggests it's from decades ago." Poirot took it, his gloved fingers tracing the elegant script. Ah, a secret correspondence hidden away, always illuminating these private confidences. Let us see what secret Sir Alistair deemed worthy of such careful concealment. He unfolded the letter gently and began to read. As he did, his expression, usually so placid, tightened. His eyes narrowed and a distinct frown appeared on his brow. "Hastings, Jap," he said, his voice unusually grave. "This letter, it speaks of a secret, a past indiscretion, and it implicates someone rather unexpected. It mentions a woman, a child, and a desperate plea for financial assistance, lest a hidden truth be revealed. And the signature, a name that connects directly to someone we have already encountered. Someone who has denied any recent, deep-seated conflict with Sir Alistair. This letter changes everything. It suggests a motive far deeper than mere robbery or a business deal gone wrong. It speaks of blackmail and a long-held secret that someone might have been prepared to kill to protect. And the most shocking part, mon ami, is that the name on this letter points to a connection so profound, so utterly intertwined with Sir Alistair's life, that its implications could shatter the very foundations of this seemingly respectable household. What if the fight Sir Alistair had on the phone, the one Tommy overheard, was not about business, but about the contents of this very letter, a secret that has been dormant for decades, now resurrected to claim its final, violent price? I felt a cold knot of dread form in my stomach. The complexity of this case was growing exponentially, and the idea of a decades-old secret leading to murder was chilling beyond words. Chapter 7. The Anonymous Blackmailer and a Mother-of-Pearl Clue. The revelation of the old letter, hidden away for decades, cast a long shadow over our understanding of Sir Alistair's life and, by extension, his death. Poirot reread the letter aloud, his voice low and solemn. It was a plea from a woman, hinting at a secret child and threatening to expose Sir Alistair if he didn't provide financial support. The letter was signed simply E.V. E.V., Poirot repeated, tapping the letter. A name or initials that connects to someone we have already met, Hastings. But who? I pressed, my mind racing through the suspects. Anya Petrova? No, her mother was Russian, and this is clearly an English hand. No, mon ami, Poirot corrected. Not to a suspect, but to a person in the orbit of Sir Alistair. A neighbor, perhaps. Think of who we have encountered today, even briefly, whose initials match. Then it clicked. Dr. Eleanor Vance, I exclaimed, remembering the sharp-witted retired academic who lived next door, whom we had briefly seen observing the commotion. Could it be her? But she seemed so harmless, so respectable. Respectability, Hastings, Poirot sighed. Often a very thin veneer over a multitude of sins. We must speak to Dr. Vance immediately. This letter suggests a history of blackmail, a potential motive for murder if the secret was about to be fully exposed. Jap, already on the phone, dispatched officers to Dr. Vance's residence. Meanwhile, Poirot returned to the iridescent button he had found. He placed it under a magnifying glass, examining its intricate details. This button, he mused, it is not merely antique. It is from a very specific period, a particular style of tailoring, likely from the Edwardian era. And the material, mother of pearl, of a very high quality. One would not find this on an ordinary garment today. Perhaps a very old waistcoat or a lady's jacket that has been cherished. So the killer could be someone wearing vintage clothing, I suggested, feeling a fresh wave of confusion. Or someone who has access to such clothing, or to whom such an item of clothing is significant, Poirot countered. Let us keep an open mind, Hastings. Sometimes the most innocent details hold the most venomous truths. A few minutes later, Dr. Eleanor Vance, a petite woman with shrewd, intelligent eyes, was brought into the drawing room. She was Chinese-British, and her demeanor was calm and composed despite the police presence. "Dr. Vance," Japp began, "we understand you are a neighbor of Sir Alistair Finch. Did you have much interaction with him?" "Indeed, for over 20 years. He was a difficult man, but not without his charms, I suppose," she said, her voice dry. "We often exchanged pleasantries over the garden fence, and occasionally a rather spirited debate over local council matters." "Did you notice anything unusual last night, Doctor?" Poirot asked, his gaze fixed on her. "Any visitors to Sir Alistair's home? Any strange sounds?" "Nothing whatsoever. I had an early night. I heard nothing out of the ordinary." Poirot then, with deliberate slowness, produced the old letter. "Dr. Vance, do you recognize this letter?" He handed it to her, watching her expression closely. Dr. Vance's composure wavered for the first time. Her eyes widened almost imperceptibly as she read the faded script. A tremor went through her hand, but she quickly regained control, her face becoming a mask of carefully constructed neutrality. This is a very old letter," she stated, her voice now a little strained. "And a very private one." "It is signed E.V., Poirot observed. "Are these your initials, Dr. Vance?" She took a deep breath. "Yes, they are, but this letter, it is from many, many years ago. It has nothing to do with Sir Alistair's death." "Perhaps," Poirot said softly. "Or perhaps it has everything to do with it. This letter speaks of a secret child, Dr. Vance. A secret child of Sir Alistair's. Are you suggesting that this is a complete fabrication?" Dr. Vance's eyes flickered, and she looked away, then back at Poirot, her expression unreadable. "It is a very long story, Mr. Poirot. One I'd hoped would remain buried with Sir Alistair. I was young. He was much older, already married. It was a brief, regrettable affair. There was a child, yes, a son. But he was given up for adoption. Sir Alistair arranged everything. He provided financial assistance for many years, on the condition of absolute secrecy. He never wanted his reputation sullied." "And the blackmail, Dr. Vance?" Japp pressed. "Did you blackmail Sir Alistair?" I sought support for the child, yes. But it was not blackmail, not truly. It was a plea. And he agreed. For decades the secret was kept. Until recently. Her voice dropped to a whisper. He wanted to tell his daughter Anya. He said it was time. He was planning to amend his will to acknowledge his estranged son. He had even started looking for him. Poirot's eyes gleamed. He was planning to amend his will, and who might this estranged son be, Dr. Vance? Do you know his identity, or where he might be now? He was born almost 50 years ago. I only knew his adoptive family's surname, Smith. A common name, I know, but Sir Alistair had found a lead, a private investigator. He was very close to finding him. He was excited, but also terrified of the scandal and of Anya's reaction. He told me he was going to meet the investigator last night to get the final details, and then speak to Anya. A cold shock went through me. Smith, Tommy Smith, the gardener. Could it possibly be? But surely not. This revelation introduced a motive of staggering proportions. The missing diary, the dinner attire, the agitated phone call Tommy had overheard. Everything was falling into place, but in a way that pointed to a deeply disturbing, almost Shakespearean tragedy. And then I remembered the button, the antique mother of pearl. What if the Smith was not just a common name, but a direct link to the very oldest secret hidden within the walls of Ashford Lane, a secret about to burst into the open with fatal consequences? Chapter 8. The gardener's bloodline and a heated confrontation. The name Smith hung heavy in the air, a common surname suddenly fraught with immense significance. Dr. Vance's revelation that Sir Alistair had an estranged son, adopted, whose adoptive family name was Smith, sent a shiver down my spine. Could Tommy Smith, the gardener, be Sir Alistair's illegitimate son? The implications were staggering. If he was, and if he knew Sir Alistair was about to acknowledge him, or perhaps even had already, it presented an entirely new, deeply personal motive. Tommy Smith, Poirot mused, his eyes distant. The gardener. He has worked here for 20 years, you say, Dr. Vance. Did Sir Alistair ever treat him with any particular favoritism, or perhaps a peculiar distance? Dr. Vance frowned, trying to recall. Sir Alistair was always particular with his staff. Demanding, but fair. I don't recall any special treatment for Tommy. But then, he was very good at his job. The gardens are immaculate, and Sir Alistair was a man who appreciated competence. Perhaps that was it. She then added, a touch of sadness in her voice. I only learned about Sir Alistair's search for our son a few weeks ago. He said he was wrestling with the idea of public acknowledgement, of finally doing right by the boy, as he put it. But he feared the scandal and the reaction of his daughter, Anya. Poirot thanked Dr. Vance, his mind clearly working overtime. Japp had already dispatched a constable to bring Tommy Smith back for further questioning. The atmosphere in the drawing room was thick with tension. The button, Poirot, I said, pointing to the iridescent object still resting on the table. Could this connect to Tommy? Does he wear anything with such buttons? Poirot picked up the button, turning it over. It is possible, Hastings, but this style, it is very old, not a modern uniform, unless perhaps he wears something of sentimental value, or something he keeps hidden away. Tommy Smith was brought back, his expression a mixture of bewilderment and growing anger. What is it now? I've told you all I know, he grumbled, his eyes darting between us. Mr. Smith, Poirot began, his voice calm but firm. We have reason to believe that Sir Alistair Finch was your biological father. The words hit Tommy like a physical blow. His face, already ruddy, went pale, then flushed a deep crimson. His jaw dropped, and he stared at Poirot, utterly speechless. What are you talking about? My father was a good, honest man, a coal miner. Died when I was a boy. Indeed, your adoptive father, Mr. Smith, Poirot corrected gently. But the letter we found, and testimony from Dr. Vance, suggest that Sir Alistair Finch was your biological father. He was, in fact, looking for you, intending to acknowledge you, and perhaps even to amend his will in your favor. Tommy's reaction was a torrent of raw, unleashed emotion. My father, Sir Alistair, that pompous, arrogant man, my father, this is a lie, a cruel joke. He was shaking, his hands clenching into fists. He never even looked at me twice, except to complain about the rose bushes. For 20 years, I've worked his land, and he treats me like dirt. And now you tell me he's my father, and he was going to acknowledge me after all this time? It's too late, too damned late. His voice was thick with a mixture of rage, grief, and a profound sense of betrayal. It was clear that the news, if true, had utterly shattered his world. Mr. Smith, Japp interjected, trying to bring some order to the room. Did you know any of this? Did Sir Alistair ever approach you about this? About your true parentage? No, never. He said nothing. I told you, he just talked about the roses. Tommy roared, tears now streaming down his weathered cheeks. If he wanted to acknowledge me, why wait until now? Why keep me in the dark for 50 years, making me tend his blasted garden while he lived in luxury? What kind of father does that? Poirot observed his emotional outburst with a detached, yet empathetic expression. Mr. Smith, were you aware that Sir Alistair was due to meet a private investigator last night, to receive the final confirmation of your identity, and that he intended to speak to his daughter, Anya, about this, and amend his will? Tommy recoiled as if struck. He was meeting someone last night to find me and change his will. Why, that selfish old fool. After all these years, he finally decides to do something, when he's on his deathbed, probably. No, this is all too convenient. He suddenly stopped, his eyes widening. Wait a minute. The phone call. I heard him arguing on the phone last night around 6. He was furious. Unacceptable, he kept saying. You can't do this. Could that have been about this? About me? It is possible, Mr. Smith, Poirot said, his voice grave. It is very possible. Tell me, Mr. Smith, what were you wearing yesterday evening, after you finished work? Tommy looked down at his rough work clothes. I went back to my cottage, had a bath, put on my Sunday best. My wife, bless her soul, insisted on it even when I was just staying in. An old tweed jacket, some good trousers. Poirot's gaze sharpened. And that tweed jacket, Mr. Smith, does it have buttons of a certain kind, perhaps of mother of pearl? Tommy blinked, then slowly reached into his pocket. He pulled out a small worn leather pouch. From it, he carefully extracted a single, exquisite mother-of-pearl button. It was identical in every respect to the one Poirot had found under the desk. This? Yes, this is an old button. Came off my grandfather's jacket, which my wife remade for me. One of the spares, but what does this have to do with anything? His eyes, now filled with a dawning horror, looked from the button in his hand to Poirot's knowing face, and then to the one Poirot had placed on the table. The silence in the room was deafening. The implication was clear, stark, and terrifying. The button, the argument, the decades of suppressed truth. It all pointed to an unbearable confrontation. Could Tommy Smith, the loyal gardener, have been driven to murder by the revelation of his birthright or by the cruel delay of its acknowledgement? And if so, how did he manage to leave the house and then conceal his involvement so thoroughly, despite being so close to the scene of the crime? Chapter 9. Alibi breakdown and a hidden past. The discovery of the matching button in Tommy Smith's possession was a devastating blow. The emotional intensity of his reaction to the news of his parentage, coupled with the overheard argument and now the physical evidence, painted a grim picture. Mr. Smith, Japp said, his voice stern, where were you between, say, 8 last night and 7 this morning? Tommy, still reeling, stammered, I was in my cottage, alone. My wife passed away 2 years ago. I had a few whiskies, tried to watch the telly, went to bed around 10, woke up when Mrs. Adebayo screamed. So, no one can corroborate your alibi? Poirot asked softly. Tommy shook his head, looking utterly defeated. No, no one. He then looked up, his eyes filled with a desperate plea. But I swear, Mr. Poirot, I didn't kill him. I hated him sometimes, yes, for how he treated me, for never seeing me, but I couldn't. Did you visit the main house last night, Mr. Smith, after you returned to your cottage? No, absolutely not. Why would I? I told you I went to bed. And your tweed jacket, the one with these buttons, Poirot continued, pointing to the 2 identical buttons on the table. Were you wearing it last night? Tommy hesitated. Yes, I was. Like I said, it's my Sunday best for evenings. But it's in my wardrobe now. I hung it up when I got undressed. We will need to examine that jacket, Mr. Smith, Japp informed him, making a note. And for now, we'll have to ask you to remain here, under observation. Tommy slumped, his shoulders bowed, looking like a man whose world had imploded. As he was led away, Japp turned to Poirot. It certainly looks bad for the gardener, Poirot. The motive, the opportunity, the button. It all points to him, a lifetime of resentment boiling over. Perhaps, Japp, Poirot said, a thoughtful frown on his face, but sometimes what appears too obvious is merely a cleverly constructed illusion. The button, while damning, could also be a misdirection. We must consider every angle. What if someone planted that button? Planted it? But why? And how would they get another one just like it? I asked, bewildered. A good question, Hastings, Poirot acknowledged. But we have not yet considered the full implications of the missing diary. If Sir Alistair was meeting a private investigator last night, he would not have been meeting him here, at the house. Sir Alistair, we are told, was discreet. He would have chosen a neutral location, and if so, the diary would likely contain the details of that meeting. But the diary is gone, Japp reminded him. Precisely, Poirot said, a glint in his eye. Which means the killer knew the importance of that diary, and took it. But if Tommy Smith was indeed the killer, fueled by a sudden, violent rage, would he have the presence of mind to meticulously search for and remove the diary, especially when the initial impression was of a robbery gone wrong? This thought gave me pause. Tommy's outburst had seemed genuinely spontaneous, emotional. Such a man, in a fit of passion, might not think of meticulously erasing evidence. And what about the phone call Tommy overheard? Poirot continued. Sir Alistair was furious, saying, "Unacceptable, you can't do this." If he was arguing with someone about his son, Tommy, why would he use those words? One would expect a more paternal, or at least a more directly confrontational tone if he was speaking to his biological son, or even the private investigator about revealing the son's identity. These words sound more like a business negotiation gone sour, a betrayal perhaps, or a desperate attempt to thwart someone's actions. Suddenly, a new possibility began to form in my mind, one that brought us back to an earlier suspect. Rohan Sharma, I exclaimed. He was Sir Alistair's business partner. They had disagreements, and he was the last person known to leave the house that evening. What if the argument Tommy overheard was with Sharma, about the land deal, or something else entirely? Poirot nodded slowly. An excellent thought, Hastings. Mr. Sharma had a financial interest in Sir Alistair's affairs, and he knew about the diary and its meticulous nature. He also knew about the valuable antique pocket watch in the safe. A man of considerable intellect and composure, he would certainly possess the presence of mind to remove incriminating evidence and stage a scene. He paused, a strange glint in his eye. But there is still one more piece of the puzzle, Hastings, one tiny, overlooked detail that none of us have yet fully comprehended. A detail that once again brings us back to that button, and a new understanding of its true significance. A significance that not only clears one man, but places the spotlight squarely on another who's been hiding in plain sight, pulling the strings from the very beginning. What if the button isn't from a coat at all, but from something entirely different, something much more subtle, yet equally distinctive, and points to a deception so elaborate that it would shock even the most hardened detective? The suspense was unbearable. Poirot clearly had another trick up his sleeve, another hidden meaning in the mundane. Chapter 10. The button's true source and a deadly betrayal. Poirot's insistence on re-evaluating the button, after it had seemed so conclusively linked to Tommy Smith, left me in a state of agitated anticipation. Something entirely different, I repeated, trying to recall every button I had ever seen. What could it be, Poirot? Not a coat, not a waistcoat. What else would have such a distinct, antique mother-of-pearl button? Poirot held the button up, letting it catch the light. Think, Hastings. What is often found in such a house of opulence and history? What item of domestic utility, yet capable of possessing such elegant, old-world charm, would be found with such fastenings? I racked my brain. Furniture? Curtains? Then a flash of inspiration. A cushion or a pillow, a decorative one, perhaps, from an antique settee. Poirot smiled, a slow, knowing smile. Almost, mon ami. You are getting warmer. Think of a personal item, one that might be found in a study, providing comfort or a sense of luxury, and what is often adorned with buttons of such a delicate, traditional design. My eyes widened. A gentleman's smoking jacket or a dressing gown. Something Sir Alistair himself might have worn, especially when working late, or entertaining a very close acquaintance. Excellent, Hastings. Precisely, Poirot exclaimed, pleased. We have been so focused on the button belonging to a visitor that we overlooked the possibility of it belonging to the host. And Madame Adebayo, you recall, said Sir Alistair never wore his going-out tweed jacket in the study. Instead, he preferred a dressing gown or casual blazer. He turned to Jap. Jap, please send someone to retrieve Sir Alistair's dressing gowns and casual blazers. We must examine their buttons. I have a very strong suspicion that our little mother-of-pearl friend originated from one of them. Jap, though surprised, immediately issued the orders. But what does this mean, Poirot? If the button came from Sir Alistair's own dressing gown, then it undermines the evidence against Tommy Smith entirely, doesn't it? It does, Jap, in a very significant way, Poirot confirmed. It suggests that the button did not fall from a struggling assailant, but rather from Sir Alistair himself during a struggle. And if it came from his dressing gown, then he was not dressed for an outing, as Madame Adebayo initially thought, but was perhaps surprised in his nightwear, and then changed or dressed by the killer to mislead us. Or perhaps he was in his dressing gown when the struggle began, and changed into the tweed jacket after the initial confrontation, for a very specific reason. Just then, a constable returned from Tommy Smith's cottage. Inspector, we found no tweed jacket with mother-of-pearl buttons, matching this one in Mr. Smith's wardrobe. His old jacket has plastic buttons, sir. The one he showed you from the pouch was definitely a spare, not attached to any garment. A wave of relief washed over me. Poor Tommy. He was innocent of this particular piece of evidence. The real button was not his. Poirot nodded, a triumphant look in his eye. You see, Jap, appearances can be deceiving. The spare button used as a distraction. Now, if the true button belonged to Sir Alistair, what does that tell us about the sequence of events? Moments later, a policewoman brought in a selection of Sir Alistair's dressing gowns and blazers. Poirot, with meticulous care, examined each garment. He picked up a magnificent silk dressing gown, a rich emerald green, and ran his fingers along the lapel. Ah, here we are, he exclaimed, pointing to a small, almost imperceptible gap where a button should have been. A missing button, exactly the same size and design as the one we found. This, mon ami, is our murder button. It came from this very dressing gown. A hush fell over the room. Jap looked astonished. So, Sir Alistair was wearing this dressing gown last night when he was attacked? But why was he found in his tweed jacket? An excellent question, Jap, Poirot replied, his gaze now distant, piecing together the final elements of his grand design. Think. Sir Alistair was meticulous. He was also expecting a visitor, someone important, perhaps the private investigator for the details of his son. He would not greet such a person in his dressing gown. He would change. But if the attack occurred before, he could fully dress, or indeed, during the act of changing. And the argument Tommy overheard. Unacceptable, you can't do this. Could it be that Sir Alistair was caught off guard, perhaps by someone already in the house, someone he was very close to, someone he trusted? Someone who then had to hastily stage the scene to look like a robbery and chose to dress him in the tweed jacket to mislead us, to suggest he was preparing to leave the house or meet someone formal rather than being caught in a moment of vulnerability. And the missing diary, who would know Sir Alistair's habits so intimately? Who would have the opportunity to stage such a scene, and who would be driven by a motive so powerful, so deeply personal, that they would erase the final appointments from his life? It all points to one person, Hastings, one very cunning individual who was privy to all of Sir Alistair's secrets, and whose motive was not financial gain or sudden rage, but a chilling act of self-preservation, a desperate attempt to protect a carefully constructed life, even if it meant taking another. And I believe that individual is very much still in this house, observing us, believing they have outsmarted Hercule Poirot. And that person is the very last one we would ever suspect. My heart hammered in my chest. Who could it be? The suspense was agonizing. Chapter 11. The Grand Revelation and a Shocking Confession. The atmosphere in the drawing room crackled with an almost unbearable tension. Poirot's pronouncements, his deductions drawing a tightening net around an unseen culprit, left me breathless. "The last person we would ever suspect, Poirot?" I whispered, my mind racing through Mrs. Adebayo, Mr. Sharma, even Dr. Vance, though she seemed to be cooperating now. Poirot surveyed the room, his eyes lingering on each person present. Japp, now fully convinced of Poirot's genius, had gathered all the main players, Mrs. Adebayo, Mr. Sharma, Anya Petrova, and even Dr. Vance, brought back for the denouement. Tommy Smith was still being held, but was now cleared of the button evidence. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began, his voice resonating with quiet authority. "We have before us a murder that was meticulously staged to resemble a common robbery. The open safe, the scattered papers, the missing valuables, all designed to lead us down a path of misdirection, but the little grey cells of Hercule Poirot observe the small details, the inconsistencies that betray the true narrative." He picked up the emerald silk dressing gown. This dressing gown, from which the missing button was found, tells us Sir Alistair was not dressed for an outing when the attack occurred. He was in his study, perhaps relaxing, perhaps preparing for a very private meeting. A meeting that the missing diary would have confirmed. Poirot then fixed his gaze on Mr. Rohan Sharma. "Mr. Sharma, you were the last person known to leave Sir Alistair's house yesterday evening around 6 o'clock. You stated you had your weekly strategy meeting. You also confirmed that you saw Sir Alistair's leather-bound diary on his desk, and you were aware that he kept an antique pocket watch in his safe." Mr. Sharma remained outwardly calm, though a flicker of unease crossed his face. "Yes, Mr. Poirot, all correct. But what are you implying?" "I am implying, Mr. Sharma, that you had ample opportunity, and more importantly, you had a powerful motive. Sir Alistair Finch, as we now know from Dr. Vance, was planning to acknowledge his illegitimate son, Tommy Smith, and to amend his will. This would have significantly impacted the inheritance of his daughter, Anya. But what about you, Mr. Sharma, his business partner? What would such a revelation mean for your empire?" Sharma scoffed. "My empire? Mr. Poirot, Sir Alistair and I built this together. His personal life had no bearing on our business." "Ah, but it does, Mr. Sharma, when one considers the larger picture," Poirot countered, his voice rising slightly. "Sir Alistair was also negotiating a controversial land development project. You admitted to disagreements with him over this. What if Sir Alistair, in his zeal to right past wrongs, was planning to use some of his substantial personal fortune, perhaps even funds from the business, to establish an inheritance for his newly found son? Or perhaps was contemplating stepping back from the business to focus on family matters? Such actions would have significantly devalued your shares, or perhaps even jeopardized the entire land deal, a project, I might add, that you were particularly keen on, as you stated." Sharma's composure began to crack. "Preposterous! I had no knowledge of any illegitimate son. This is outrageous speculation." "Is it?" Poirot challenged, stepping closer. "Tommy Smith overheard Sir Alistair on the phone around 6:30 yesterday evening after you left. Sir Alistair was furious, saying, 'Unacceptable, you can't do this.' This was not an argument with a son, but a desperate plea, perhaps, to a business partner who was attempting to double-cross him. What if, Mr. Sharma, you did not leave at 6? What if you returned, or never truly left, perhaps hiding in wait? You had the code for the gate, being a close confidante. And you knew Sir Alistair's routine, his meticulous nature, and crucially, the existence of his diary, which would contain evidence of his intentions regarding his son, or perhaps a separate secret deal that would expose your betrayal." Anya Petrova, Dr. Vance, and Mrs. Adebayo watched in horrified silence. Japp's hand instinctively went to his sidearm. "You knew he would change from his dressing gown to his tweed jacket for his meeting with the private investigator." Poirot continued, his voice now a quiet hammer blow. You anticipated that moment, and when he was vulnerable, perhaps still in his dressing gown or halfway through changing, you confronted him. The argument you overheard was not with a mysterious third party, but with you, Mr. Sharma. He resisted. A struggle ensued in which a button from his dressing gown was torn off and fell beneath the desk. Poirot gestured to the button. And then, in a cold, calculating act, you shot him. You took the diary to erase all traces of his plans for his son and any other incriminating appointments. You opened the safe, taking the watch and bonds, not for their value, but to stage a convincing robbery. And finally, you dressed Sir Alistair in his tweed jacket to suggest he was alive and well, preparing for an evening out, rather than being murdered in his private study while vulnerable, at your hands. You planted the spare button in Tommy Smith's pouch earlier that evening, or even weeks ago, knowing he kept a similar jacket to create a perfect scapegoat for a moment such as this, a fallback should you ever be suspected. Sharma's face was ashen. His eyes darted around the room, trapped. You have no proof, no witness. Ah, but I have the proof of the little grey cells, Monsieur Sharma, Poirot countered, his eyes blazing. And the proof of your meticulously crafted alibi, which now crumbles under the weight of these small, yet significant, inconsistencies. You underestimated the power of truth and the persistence of Hercule Poirot. You sought to protect your financial interests and perhaps your carefully constructed reputation by eliminating Sir Alistair, silencing his revelations, and framing an innocent man. It was a cold, calculated betrayal. The motive, mon ami, was not simply greed, but the preservation of a life built on a lie that Sir Alistair was about to dismantle. A gasp went through the room. Sharma's eyes, once so calm, now blazed with a desperate, cornered fury. He would have ruined everything, he suddenly screamed, his voice breaking. Everything we built, he was going to give it all away to that gardener and expose all my investments in the new project. He deserved it. Jap moved swiftly, placing handcuffs on a trembling Rohan Sharma. The silence that followed was heavy, filled with the raw emotion of a truth finally unearthed. The murder on Ashford Lane, initially appearing as a simple robbery, was revealed to be a complex web of deceit, betrayal, and a desperate act of self-preservation. A chilling testament to the lengths some would go to protect their secrets. Chapter 12. The Unraveling and the Comfort of Routine. With Rohan Sharma's shocking confession, the suffocating tension in the drawing room began to dissipate, replaced by a somber quiet. Anya Petrova stared at Sharma, a mixture of disbelief and profound sadness on her face. Dr. Vance looked away, her expression a complex blend of vindication and sorrow for the secret finally out. Mrs. Adebayo simply wept silently, mourning the loss of a life brutally cut short. Poirot watched Sharma being led away, his expression unreadable. "The human heart, Hastings," he murmured. "A complex mechanism, capable of such great love and such profound treachery." Jap returned, shaking his head. "Never thought it would be Sharma, Poirot. He always seemed so steady, so respectable. Thank you, once again. You've cracked another impossible case." "It was not impossible, Jap," Poirot corrected gently. "Merely complicated. The truth, like a river, will always find its way to the sea no matter how many dams are built against it. The lies, they pile up, and eventually they become too heavy to bear. Sharma's elaborate staging, the missing diary, the planted button, even Sir Alistair's unusual attire, they were all threads in a tapestry of deception, but each thread, when examined closely, pointed back to the weaver. Later, back in our flat, the familiar comfort of our routine was a welcome balm after the day's grim discoveries. Poirot sat in his armchair, meticulously polishing his monocle. "So, the button from Sir Alistair's dressing gown confirmed he was attacked unexpectedly," I recounted, trying to consolidate the facts in my mind. and the tweed jacket was a deliberate misdirection by Sharma to make it seem Sir Alistair was preparing to leave or meet someone formal. Precisely, Hastings, Poirot affirmed. Sharma knew Sir Alistair was particular. To find him in a dressing gown would indicate a surprise attack, perhaps by an insider. Dressing him in the tweed jacket suggested a pre-arranged meeting or a departure, which aligned with the robbery narrative. It was a clever touch, but ultimately it became another inconsistency. And the phone call Tommy overheard, I added. Sir Alistair arguing about something unacceptable, and you can't do this. That was with Sharma, discussing his plans to acknowledge Tommy and change his will, or perhaps expose Sharma's new investment scheme. Exactly. Sharma, knowing his carefully constructed financial future was about to be dismantled, chose to act decisively. He returned to the house after feigning departure, or perhaps never left, waiting for his moment. He knew Sir Alistair would be alone, vulnerable in his study, preparing for his meeting with the private investigator. The diary would contain all the details, the names, the dates, the evidence of Sir Alistair's intentions. It had to disappear. And the planted button in Tommy's pouch? Poirot sighed. That, mon ami, was a contingency. Sharma knew Tommy had an old jacket with similar buttons, from a shared family history perhaps, or simply a detail he had observed over years of association. It was a cruel, opportunistic stroke of genius intended to provide a ready-made suspect should the police ever look beyond the robbery. He had probably exchanged one of Tommy's real buttons for a similar one, then planted a spare in the pouch for later discovery, hoping the police would find it and link it directly to Tommy. It shows a mind both desperate and calculating. So Tommy Smith, I said, feeling a surge of pity for the man. He was completely innocent, a pawn in Sharma's game. Indeed, a man deeply wronged by fate and human treachery. But now at least he knows his true lineage. Perhaps in time he will find some peace in that, and the rightful inheritance that will now no doubt be passed to him. And Dr. Vance, I pondered. Her secret about Sir Alistair's son, kept for 50 years, finally revealed, and Anya, her life turned upside down by these revelations. The truth, Hastings, has a way of surfacing, no matter how long it is buried, Poirot said, a profound note in his voice, and often it brings both pain and, eventually, a form of justice. The murder on Ashford Lane was not just the killing of a man, but the violent unraveling of a lifetime of secrets, ambitions, and betrayals. A truly poignant case. He stood up, walked to the window, and looked out at the familiar London street, now bathed in the gentle evening light. Another case closed, mon ami. Another triumph for the little grey cells, and a reminder that even in the most respectable corners, the darkness can lurk. But where there is darkness, there too must be light, oui, the light of truth brought by Hercule Poirot. Thank you for joining us on this thrilling journey through the murder